Today we're talking about probably one of the things that I'm most passionate about on the planet. But before we get there, let me first begin by asking a really good question. Anyone here really good at losing things? We got a few things. Okay, cool. Yeah, okay. Got a few people that are really good at losing. I'm great at losing things from time to time, but I make good adjustments. So when I lose something, it sits into my soul in a place that says, okay, let's make an adjustment so we don't lose the thing the next time. And so I have a routine. The things you typically lose, like car keys and wallet, those kind of things, you misplace them. I set them in the same place every time I walk in the door. And I put them there, and so my wallet goes here, and my AirPods go here, and the keys hang on the little key hanging thingamajigger. And so that's where they go. And every time I get ready to go and leave, that's where those things are. And why are they there? Because I put them in the same place every single time. Unless someone else comes and decides that that's not the appropriate place for them, which they would be wrong, but they are still making a judgment call in that moment, and they decide to move those things to another place. Right? And in that moment, in their wrongness, they could possibly lose something for me, but the truth is they know where it is, so it's really not lost. It's just lost to me, but it's found to them, that kind of thing. Full disclosure, just a couple weeks ago, actually, not this past week, this right behind us, but a week ago, I was out of town for 3 or 4 days. And when I come home, I was missing my pair of slippers. Okay, I don't know if y'all have slippers. I have slippers. I love the slippers. They're fantastic. Here's the deal. This is why I love slippers, because the bathroom that we have has this tile in it, and for some reason we built right over the place where the Arctic Circle funnels up through Georgia, and the floor in the bathroom is really, really cold. And so in the middle of the night, from time to time, I have to get up out of my nice slumber, and I need to make my way into that room to do. I gotta go pee. So I gotta go in there, and what I don't want to happen in that moment is I do not want to fully wake up. I want to be mostly asleep, and I want to get the thing done, and I want to go back to bed without really processing that I'm walking around. You know what I'm saying? I got a point. That's what I'm talking about. That's it. That's what I'm trying to do. And so the slippers help that. If I don't have the slippers and I step on the cold floor, immediately it's like, I'm awake. And now I'm mad. I'm mad at myself. I'm mad at myself that I can't just not go pee right now, that I have to wake up in the middle. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I'm like, man, I'm not even a decent human being anymore. And so I'm having these inward talks. It's a bad thing. So I get home and I can't find these slippers. Now, I'm not going to tell my wife that I can't find them because I don't want to be accused of man looking. And so I want to for sure make sure that I've looked in all the places before I tell her I can't find these things. Why are y'all still laughing? The joke was 10 minutes ago. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And so I'm looking in all the places. In the closet, I've got a place that I could put my shoes. Now, it just so happens that in my closet, I have a number of shoes that are long gone. I call them cut the grass shoes. But I've got 3 or 4 pair of cut the grass shoes, but I hold on to them because they still fit. There's not holes all the way through all of them, and so I hold on to them just in case I cut the grass one day and I need to cut it again the next day, and these are dirty or wet or something. I've got a second cut. Now, if I cut the grass 4 days in a row, I've got an issue, but I still have a few of those. So even I pull those back, and I'm looking because these slippers they're very easily, they're like a little brown, like they feel so good on your feet, you know what I'm saying? I might even wear them around all the time, but it's just frowned upon. So for sure, I'm looking at them, I'm looking for them, and I can't find them. So I'm like, well, where else could they be, right? Well, they could be in the bathroom because we have a little place you can put some laundry in there. So it's like, maybe they got thrown in there. And so I went in there, and I pulled out the laundry hamper, and sure enough, there's nothing there. There's no slippers there. And so I'm looking in other places. We have a little bench on the front of our bed, at the foot of our bed. And it's like a family heirloom thing, came from Brooks' family. So I look under there because sometimes things fall again. There's nothing there. And so I'm like, well, maybe I wore them the last time before I got on the plane the next day that night in the living room where the recliner is that I sit in, right? And sometimes I take them off while I'm there and they fall, and maybe I put the recliner closed and they go on. So I open it up, I'm looking under there. They're not there. There is no other place these things could possibly be. They're just nowhere. They're gone. And so I'm still trying not to make a big deal about it because for sure in my mind, my wife knows exactly where these are, and then I'm going to feel, and so I just don't want it. So I go 3 or 4 days without it. Every night I'm waking up and like, oh man, I need those stinking slippers. Right? Well, finally I decide just a couple days ago, I was like, hey, have you seen my slippers? Have you seen my slippers? And of course, Brooke looks at me and she's like, no, I haven't seen your slippers. I was like, okay. All right, Hadley, our little girl, she hears the conversation. I guess she was in the kitchen, something, and so she sticks her head in. She's like, I know where your slippers are. Why would you know where my slippers are? And where are they? Well, because I put them where they are. Where are they? I put them under the bed. Under the bed? Why would you put them under the bed? Well, the thing is that I usually have them right next to the bed. So when I get out of the bed, I put them right on, and then I begin walking. And it's just a brainless thing. And so she said, well, you weren't here, so that they didn't go. So I slid them under the bed. Well, so I was like, well, fine. Then I'm looking. She reaches 16 foot under the bed, and she pulls out the slippers. Like, here they are. Ta-da, right? That's it. I don't know if you experienced those things, but here's the truth. From what I've gathered about the human experience is that all of us are really good at losing things. Very few of us are actually good at finding them. And what we find is that Jesus wants to make sure we understand how important it is to get good at finding. There's a moment in the life of Jesus that Luke, the historian, the doctor, records. If you've been with us for a few weeks, we've been in this book of Luke, which is found right at the beginning of the New Testament and the newer half of the Bible. There's an Old Testament and a New Testament. In the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, and Luke sits right there. Luke was a guy who took it upon himself to record through interviews and interviewing people and gathering data and gathering stories. And we have this account of a lot of the ministry of Jesus. And Luke gives this to us from a historical perspective. And one of these stories, this account of what happens in the life of Jesus, starts in Luke chapter 15. And it starts in verse 1 and 2 with, if you're familiar with the last 2 weeks, you're going to hear this and like, I know exactly what we're talking about. Verse 1 says this: Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, This man welcomes sinners and eats with them. Now, if you've been here the last couple weeks, you're like, hold on, isn't this what we talked about last week? Aren't you reading the same passage? And aren't you reading the same passage as you read 2 weeks ago? No, I'm not. A completely different passage. It's just that these words, this event continues to happen over and over and over again in the life of Jesus. And Luke records it. It's this constant refrain where Jesus is accused of, he's muttered against, of this whole, he welcomes tax collectors and sinners and he eats with them. And that's what they're saying. Now, when they mutter, again, we said 2 weeks ago, anytime we see the word mutter, it's not a good mutter. It's a bad mutter. It's like a mutter, 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 mutter. You know what I'm saying? It's a bad mutter. And we don't like the bad muttering, but that's what happens when people mutter. And they're muttering, he welcomes sinners and eats with them. What does that mean? He welcomes them and eats with them. Who you eat with in the first century is a social status flex. And honestly, the more exclusive the list, the better the flex. And so for sure, it's like, hey, here's the deal. If I were to be a famous teacher to go to a particular village, I want to make sure that I am meeting or eating with like the guys at the top of the list. There's a short list of people that I want to go and entertain with. There's a short list of people that I want to spend my meal times with. And now here's the deal. The people that Jesus often finds himself eating with aren't on the short list. But the truth is, they're not on the long list either. You know what I'm talking about? Everybody's got to have a list. You got a short list of the people you actually want, but law requires you have a longer list because you got to do other. So you got a long list, but the truth is, I've already decided this to these 2 or 3 people. They're not even on the extra be polite list. They're not on that list. In fact, if they're on a list, oftentimes they're on the list of the people do not go see. Stay away from these people. Avoid at all costs. Don't get wrapped up in wasting your time with these types of people. That's the kind of list that Jesus is hanging out with. But it's not only that kind of list. Here's the crazy thing. Luke actually records the different people that Jesus eats with. This is his list. He eats with just random crowds. Thousands of people will be there and he will have dinner. And all of them will eat together. There's an instance where he just records Jesus has dinner with a few thousand people, right? Just a big, huge crowd. He has dinner with a pair of sisters, Mary and Martha, right? Just two girls, just two sisters. He has dinner with them. He has dinner with his disciples, his closest friends, the people who are following him around all the time. He has dinner with the Pharisees, the people who are complaining about who Jesus has dinner with. He has dinner with them. He has dinner with the tax collectors. He has dinner with people that the Pharisees label as just plain out sinners. You see, the Pharisees understand this flex that happens in the life of someone in the first century with who you eat with says a lot about who you are, your social status, and kind of the who's who of what's happening in terms of who you are dining with at the table. And so the Pharisees want to make sure that everyone knows that their dinner table is exclusive. In fact, they would prefer everyone know that mealtime is as exclusive as heaven, which is the truth. Heaven is exclusive. Jesus comes right out and just tells us, he says, hey, here's the deal. There's no way for you to get to the Father except through me. Like there's no workaround. There's no back door. There's no alternative method. He says, hey, I'm the only way. Jesus is the only way to get there, and it's an exclusive path, and that's it. Now, everybody is welcome to jump on the path, to jump on the voyage, but it's just Jesus. There's no way to get to God or to get right with God except through Jesus. So it's a very exclusive thing. Not exclusive because he wants it to be, but exclusive because people say, hey, I'm not interested in doing this. This path is not for me. I'm going to try my best to find a workaround, and they're all just dead ends. And so the Pharisees, that's what they want their mealtime to be. Heaven's exclusive, our mealtime is exclusive. Jesus, on the other hand, knows and believes the exact same thing the Pharisees do. He knows that heaven is incredibly exclusive. And so because of that, though, he leverages his mealtime, his social time, to be as inclusive as possible. He says, hey, if I'm going to invest time with people in the most social setting, I'm not going to be exclusive in that time because my ultimate goal and destination is so exclusive. I want to make sure I'm so inclusive here and now so that every single person might come to understand who Jesus is and why he is so significant. He's not significant to a follower of Jesus because they follow him. He's significant because he's the only way to get right with God, and God is real. So Jesus practices this enormous, inclusive dinner table. Now we would think, like, oh, goodness, these Pharisees and teachers of the law, they just don't get it. But the truth is that it wasn't just Pharisees and teachers of the law that were dealing with this. In fact, if we fast forward from this moment past the crucifixion of Jesus and past the resurrection of Jesus, if we even fast forward past the day where the church begins, the day of Pentecost, when the church movement really gets started, if we fast forward past that and we even go a little bit further, we're still in the beginnings of the church, but the church is now established. There's a guy by the name of Peter who was a really great and close friend of Jesus, arguably probably one of his most astute and in terms of leadership and just incredible guys that follow Jesus. And Peter is now kind of leading the charge in many areas on the church front in terms of growing the church. And Peter has this wrestle inside of him about people who are not connected to God, who are Gentiles, is the way the Bible would describe them, people who are not Jews. He's having a really difficult time getting them in his brain connected from completely disconnected in the Gentile to being a Christian. And in fact, in his mind, it's like, okay, there's a path, and we want to go disconnected. We want to become Jews, and then after you're Jewish, then you can become a Christian. We have this path that we want them to follow, but for sure, these Gentiles are unclean, and Gentiles would be someone like me, right? And any of you who are not Jewish. Like, we're Gentiles, that's who this qualifies, right? So, like, man, there's just issues with them, and I can't figure out how to connect the dots to make them who the Christian thing. God's doing, and I can't get into the whole story. I think we're going to cover it in the fall when I looked at our teaching calendar, but I can't get into it all here. But there's a moment where God's trying to work with Peter to say, Peter, wake up. I need you to do something different than what you're doing. Anyway, he ends up going to the house of a Gentile And people back in Jerusalem hear about this, and they lose their mind. They're like, what? Let me read you what it says. It says, the apostles and believers throughout Judea heard that the Gentiles also had received the word of God. In other words, they were becoming Christians. So when Peter went up to Jerusalem, the circumcised believers criticized him and said, you went into the house of uncircumcised men and ate with them? Right? Now, if your kid's in the room, I don't know what to tell you. Welcome to grown-up time. We're talking about circumcision. So he's saying, hey, here's the deal. So the circumcised believers, right? Those are people who have been circumcised. And so when they hear that Jesus goes and hangs out with people who did not get circumcised to become Christian, hey, they're like, whoa. You went into the house of an uncircumcised man and you ate dinner with him? You know, I don't know what happens. I don't know if you walk in and you're like, hey, I'm circumcised and you're not. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. You don't know either. You're laughing, but I don't know. But for sure, I'm picturing the men eating apples naked. I don't know. That's what I'm picturing. They're just having a snack. I don't know. But for sure, listen. They are like upset about, and there's a whole stink about this. There's a huge issue. Eventually they get it ironed out. But even the people who were closest to Jesus, I tell you the whole thing, just tell you, even the people who were closest to Jesus are having a really difficult time with even someone like Peter, who's not Jesus, spending time eating with people who do not fit perfectly into their top list. Okay, if you're going to go eat with people, Peter, if you're going to go eat with people, it can't be uncircumcised men, right? Now, to be fair, Peter didn't want to go either. The Holy Spirit had to do some convincing and convicting in his heart to even get him to take up the dinner date, right? Which is, again, a whole nother story. But I say that just to say, it wasn't just Pharisees and tax collectors who were having issue with how we connect with people who are disconnected from faith. Even the newest, most staunch followers of Jesus in the first century were having difficulty with this. And so Jesus perceives this line that's in Luke 15, verse 2. This man welcomes sinners and eats with them. And Jesus has a decision to make. And so he's processing through this, and he didn't wake up that morning and write a message on an iPad and have some notes. That wasn't it. He sees the interaction that's going on, and immediately he decides, you know what? I need to share something with you. And so he begins to share with them. He says, hey, listen, suppose a shepherd has 100 sheep, and he loses one. Does he not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one and search until he finds it? And then puts the lamb on his shoulders and brings him back, and then calls his neighbors and his friends and says, celebrate with me because I had a lost sheep and now he's found. Isn't that what you do? Now, for those who are listening, he didn't pose it as I'm interested in your opinion. Let's go back and forth on the pros and cons list. Jesus just says, well, of course, this is what you do. If you've got 100 sheep and one goes missing, you leave the 99 in open country and you go and search for the one until you find it. Now, here's what's important. Jesus didn't say you go search for the one until it gets dark and you can't see anything anyway, so let me go on back. He didn't say, you know what, good gracious alive, you got a head start. I need to go find some more help. He just says, hey, you go and search until you find it. Until you find it. Not a good old college try, but no, actually, you had something that was lost and you search until you find it. And then, once you find it, you bring it back home and you call your neighbors and your friends and say, let's celebrate, let's have a party. In other words, what Jesus wants us to know is that the church is the worst when the safety of the 99 satisfies us. So if we were sitting there thinking, this is how it works. We're like, okay, I got a sheep, it's lost. I had 100, And now I got 99. All right, what do I do? Well, for sure, 99 isn't as good as 100. But I'll tell you what, 98 isn't as good as 99. And so I'm going to make sure that these 99 stay safe. I'm going to cut my losses because that makes sense. I don't want to go from 99 to 98. I don't want to go from 98 to 97. I don't want to go from 97 to 96. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to circle up around these 99, and I'm going to make sure they got what they need so that I don't lose another person because I don't want to lose people. All of a sudden, the shepherd defines his worth on what he can keep rather than what he can find. And that's when the church becomes the worst. When the safety of the 99 satisfies us. Jesus tells the story. And I don't know, the Bible doesn't tell us what the reaction is in that moment. But for some reason, Jesus looks out at the crowd as this is taking place. And he tells the story. And I don't know if their eyes were glazed over or maybe they were so engaged, they're like, tell me more. I don't know if it was one of those extremes. But for some reason, Jesus decides one story today is not going to be enough. And so he says, I'll tell you a second. And so then he says, hey, there's this lady. She had 10 coins. And in her house, one goes missing. So now she's only got 9. So doesn't she like sweep the whole house? And like look under everything. It's like, hey, I'm your picture, like picking up, you're looking in all the nooks and crannies and you're trying to find it. And then when she finally finds the lost coin that she was missing, doesn't she call her friends and neighbors and say, come on over to the house. I had this coin. I had 10 of them. I lost it. I was down to 9. So I searched everywhere and I found it. So come on back. Let's go. Let's celebrate. Now, I don't know. I don't know why people, maybe I would think that if I told you that I had $100,000 in my house and I lost I lost 10,000, but I found it, so come over, let's have a party. I don't know if that's something I would tell everybody, you know what I'm saying? Like I just put it under my mattress and Hadley thought I wasn't here, so she threw it under the bed, but I found it, let's party, you know? Church is the worst when searching becomes a check-the-box chore instead of an urgent search and rescue mission. Right, so when it becomes just like cleaning the house, you know, it's like, okay, I got chores to do. Let me clean the house. If I find it, that's great. But honestly, if I don't find it, eventually it'll turn up, right? If I clean enough, eventually it'll turn up, you know? But I'm not going to lose sleep over this. Because eventually, I know it's here somewhere, right? And so when this idea of people disconnected from faith, when it just becomes a check-the-box chore, man, that's when it becomes the worst. This is the way we see this practically play out. Now, in the church that I grew up in, this is kind of how it would work. So as I'm saying this, it may be Monday. I said Tuesday earlier. I'm pretty sure it was Tuesday. On Tuesday nights, we had this thing called visitation. And you could go to the church, and we had a church van. And you could get into the church van and load up in there, and you would go visit people, right? You go visit people. And here's the thing. From what I understand, I was young. From what I understand, you didn't even have to call before you showed up. Like as long as the pastor was at the front of the line, however many people filed out of the van, as long as the pastor was at the front of the line, they weren't going to shoot you. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not going to shoot him. And so he would just lead up to the door and he'd knock on the door and you might hear some scurrying, but they're not going to tell the pastor he can't come in. No, that's a no-no back then. You know what I'm saying? They're like, so clean up. And then they open the door like, oh my goodness, what a pleasant surprise. All of you strangers who I don't know. Wow, come on in. Let's sit in the living room and talk for 2 hours, right? That's what would happen. I was like, hey, okay, we're going to do visitation on Tuesday nights. Or maybe it turns into like a Saturday door knocker thing. I was like, hey, you know what? Let's go to Summer Grove and knock on the doors and just say, hey, my name is such and such, and I'm with this church, and I'd like to introduce you to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, right? And that's what we do. Like, okay, well, I did my Saturday deal. I did my Tuesday night visitation, and so I've checked the box, and that's what I've done. Right? I've done my things. I've done my little evangelism, right? I've gone searching in the wilderness for the one, right? I've done it. Check the box. Now, can I move on with the other things I'm more interested in my life? Because it was a chore. It was a check the box moment. That's when church becomes the worst. Let me give you an even more practical example because our church doesn't do either of those two things, okay? But let's just say that some of you get this wild idea that you're going to start serving at events that we do in the community, and your purpose is going to be, watch how many people I get to come to Foundation. So our ice cream truck, which is out there, any of y'all can take it. Y'all can get in it and go. I mean, let us know ahead of time. But like, any of you can take it. So let's just say you got a community event that's happening. Like you're, I don't know, Girl Scout, Boy Scout, whatever. I don't know what you're doing, but whatever you're doing. And they want to do ice cream truck. They go on, they fill out a thing. You can take the truck. We'll stock it for you. You ain't got to go by a grocery store. We'll stock it for you. It'll be clean. You just show up, you get in the truck, and you can drive it. And if you feel uncomfortable about driving, a lot of times we'll drop it off, and then you can work it, and then we'll go pick it back up. But you can do that. I promise you, Jason is our community outreach pastor. He will never ask you when you return the truck, hey, now how many people said they were coming to church? Because that's not something we measure. Even the simple act of serving people with, it's just the simplicity of ice cream. The reason we do that is not to get people to come to church. We have 3 rules of outreach. I'm not going to get into the first 2, but the last one is outreach is never a recruitment strategy. Like that's not the reason we serve people in our community. We serve them because we ought to be serving, not because of what they will give us in return. We don't want to run out into our community and say, hey, we got this really cool thing. We're going to serve you today. But secretly, we're trying to get handcuffs out of our back pocket, put them on our wrist, handcuff them to their wrist, and drag them to the destination, which is this fantastic facility on Sunday mornings where the life will be transformed. Like, that's not what we believe in at all. But if that's the way you see it, if you see us in our community events as you checking the box on searching for the one, that's when church becomes the worst. Jesus finishes this story, and I don't know what the faces look like, but Jesus looks out at the crowd, and he sees their faces after telling not one, but 2 stories. And I don't know if their eyes were glazed over or they were fixed in saying, I want more. We don't know. But we do know is Jesus decides in that moment, I want to tell you a 3rd story. And so he says, there was a father who had 2 sons. And the youngest son came to the father and said, hey, I would like to get my inheritance now. He's coming to the dad. Obviously, he's got a fairly large estate. We come to find out it's got some cattle on it and all that kind of stuff through details of the story. And so it's a big old get up, right? And so this younger son says, I want my inheritance now, right? He's like, oh man, you are loaded, and I do not want to wait to enjoy this when you're gone, right? So I want to do it now. So can you do that? Can you hook a brother up? And sure enough, he's like, yeah, all right. And so I don't know. He goes to his financial planner and liquidates some stuff. I don't know how that works, but he gives the guy some money. And so he takes his inheritance, and he goes off to a far country. And it doesn't tell us all the specifics, but he wastes and squanders his money on wild living, right? Can you imagine someone who's never been away from home, who has no actual responsibility at the moment? It just decided he gets a big old chunk of money, no accountability. Nobody even knows who he is. Nobody knows who his daddy is. And all of a sudden, he is just making it rain all over the place, you know? And he is out of money before you can shake a stick at him. And the truth is, when he's out of money, the Bible tells us that a famine hits, and so he can't get it. He is struggling. He's desperate. And so he goes to a farmer, and he's like, you got a job? He's like, yeah, feed the pigs. And before you know it, this guy is thinking, he's like, I got nothing. And he begins to think, I might just eat what the pigs are eating. He's gone from loaded and just plenty of income and resources to the best thing I got going for me is I can probably slide my hand in this pig slop and eat something. And he begins to process, what am I going to do? And so he says to himself, man, the guys that work on my dad's farm, they eat better than I am right now. They're taking care. So I know I can't go. I know I have ruined my opportunity to be a good son. I insulted. I mean, I took my entire inheritance, and I've just, what my dad took, maybe even generations to, I've wasted it in no time. But maybe my dad will give me a job. And so he begins rehearsing this speech. Okay, Dad, I've sinned in front of heaven. I've sinned for you. This big speech. And so he starts headed back, and he's practicing the speech as he's going. He's practicing the speech as he's going. And sure enough, as he gets close to the property, and I don't know if he's on the property yet, or maybe he's still, it just says he's a long way off. And the dad sees the son in the distance. And then the dad runs off the porch, and he's running to him. And all of a sudden, you start hearing the violins and the cellos come in because it's slow motion music. And they're running in slow motion in the middle of, and they meet right there in the middle. The Bible doesn't say that at all, actually. But they meet in the middle, right? And the dad had run to him. And they meet in the middle, and he's staring at him. And so here comes the speech that he'd been preparing. He's like, Dad, I've sinned in front of heaven, and I sinned in front of you. And Dad's like, oh, hold on. Wait. He's like, hey, get my robe. Somebody get my robe. And they go, get my slippers. They knew where his slippers were. You know what I'm saying? Get my slippers. Get my ring, because the ring says you're in the family, like you belong. Get my ring, put it on his finger. Come on, let's kill the fat cow out back. We are T-boning this bad boy tonight. Let's go. Kill it. Slaughter it. We're going to throw a party. Throw a huge feast. Invite everyone. Big, enormous celebration. And so the party starts, right? He's like, you are welcome. And he's telling everybody, my son was lost. He's home. And a huge party is happening. And then the older brother is out back. And so he's been such a good guy. He's been doing everything his dad asked him to. And so he's out back working. But sure enough, the work day is coming to a close, and he's headed back to the house. And undoubtedly, he is seeing the ruckus that is happening. He's like, man, there's a party happening. I don't know if there's a DJ. I don't know what's happening. But he can see that there's a huge celebration. And as he's walking up, he's like, hey, what's going on? And so one of the other guys that works is like, hey, your brother's back. He's like, my brother's back? We're throwing a party? Yeah. And so the dad starts, he's partying, he's doing a thing, celebrating. He's looking around, where's my oldest son? And so he goes out back, and sure enough, he's back there. He's like, hey, what's going on? And so the older son looks at him and says, hey, Dad, bro, I've been doing everything that you asked me to do the whole time. Like I've been like a good kid. I've been like the poster child of good kids. I do everything you asked me to do. And you've never even given me a goat to celebrate with my friends. But you kill the fat cow for him, right? Like the fattened calf, right, or the fat cow, it's the cow that you wait on. Like you get them just plump and perfect, you know what I'm saying? And when it's a big day, and it's like, this is what, all I want's a goat. Can a brother get a goat? You know what I'm saying? Can I get a goat? I don't even need a party. I just need a goat. I want to have a Friday night with a goat and my friends. That's all I want. You know what I'm saying? That's what I was asking for. He's like, can I get a goat? And the dad looks at him and says, son, look around. Everything I have is yours. Like, you want a goat? All the goats, they're yours. The cow that was slaughtered, the fat one, yours. Everything I have is yours. None of what I have is his. Everything I have is yours. What do you mean? I haven't given you a goat. I've given you everything. I've given you everything. I get it, though. I get it. The older brother was like, yeah, he's back because he didn't want to eat pig slop. Who wouldn't come back, right? Of course. He didn't really change, though. Watch. He'll do what he says for a little bit, and then he'll find some way to sneak back off. Church is the worst when we are cynics instead of celebrators. And the truth is, sometimes celebration is the piece needed to get someone truly over the hump. Go with me for a second, okay? Go with me for a second. Let's not just talk about the coolness of having a party, right? Let's not just talk about that. Let's talk about the reality of what happens in your brain when people that care for you and love for you celebrate you. Let's talk about that. Like when you are celebrated by the people who care and love and look out for you, when they celebrate who you are, when they celebrate you, when they celebrate a good step in your life, man, that sometimes is the momentum we need to say, not only did I take a step and now you celebrated my step, now I want to take another one. I thought I would be met with some cynicism, and I thought that I would be met with it's only temporary, and I thought I was going to be whatever the things are, fill in the blank, but I was met with celebrate, like you are pumped. You're throwing a party because I took one step in the right direction, and all of a sudden I've decided I don't want to live that life. I don't think I'm tooled just yet to be able to leave it completely behind, but I want to. And you're celebrating just that I want to, that I showed back up at home. That's what you're celebrating. You're celebrating that I was lost and now I'm found. That's what you're celebrating. Yeah, the dad is not celebrating. The woman is not celebrating. The shepherd is not celebrating that the sheep never has the potential to wander off again. That's not what they're celebrating. They're celebrating you were lost, and at this moment, you are no longer lost. And the truth is, the way we celebrate those moments often impacts the steps that happen next, and whether or not the sheep wants to run off again. Because celebration shows belonging. Because the truth is, we don't celebrate things we don't care about. We don't. They just come and go. Like, oh, that's great. That was so good. Yeah, it was good. That was cool. You know? Tom Brady's retiring. For some of you, that's a big deal. For me, I don't care. 28-3, it just haunts me. You know what I'm saying? So I don't care. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, okay, whatever. Fill in the blank. It's like, okay, that's cool, right? It is what it is. You know what I'm saying? But the things we truly care about, things we truly care about. When your grandmother retires, celebration in there. It's like, let's go. We're going to celebrate this. Because you celebrate the people you care about. You acknowledge the things that don't matter. Like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, great job. Cool. But you celebrate the people you care about. And I'm even talking about, let's just say, oh, well, no, you don't know my person because they will not let me throw them a party. Yeah, okay, you get away with it for a couple years. But the truth is, you turn something with a round number on the end of it, you get a party, right? We're getting a party. Why? Not because it's because this is how we show love. You're like, well, show me love by not partying. No! Because we celebrate what we care about. We celebrate what we care about. Jesus told 3 stories. 3 stories. And all of it was because of one line. Quote, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." And he hears that criticism, welcomes and eats with sinners. And he says, let me tell you 3 stories about welcoming and eating with sinners. Now, a good principle is if Jesus says something, it's important. He's the Son of God. So if he says, hey, I want you to pay attention to this, if he says, this is the way I want you to, that's a pretty big thing. However, when Jesus says something 3 times, it ought to strike a bit of fear in our hearts if we were to listen to those 3 things that he says, not separately over the course of 3 or 4 years, but in one single solitary conversation, not just repeating himself like sometimes I do where I'll say the same thing 3 times. No, the way he did it was I told you one story that said the same thing, and then I told you the second story that said the same thing, and then I told you a third story that said the same thing. What does it say? Lost, found, celebrate. Lost, found, celebrate. Lost, found, celebrate. And the church is the worst when we try to put something between lost, found, and right here we put something that's our own. A lot of times what we'll put there is, let's double check and make sure it's real, right? Lost, found, interview, celebrate. Or lost, found, Let's do a little bit of an internship type thing where we intern you into religion, right? Let's just see if this is legit. Lost, found, fill in the blank, celebrate. And when we do that, church becomes the worst. And I get it. You're like, well, I've been burned too many times. Yeah, get over yourself. Who hasn't been burned? You want to talk about someone who's been burned? Think about the person who knit every single one of you together in their womb and died on the cross for you. Get in line. Get in line. While we were still sinners, Jesus Christ died for us. You want to talk about getting burned? When you die for someone and they don't care, then you can get in line. But until then, we just pile on what we can do. Okay, fine. People disappoint us. People upset us. People don't meet our expectations. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Their failure is not on us. Our inability to follow what Jesus has asked and called us to do, that is on us. We might say, well, we use logic and we use our brains and those kind of things. Yeah, well, I don't know. This father seemed like he was a pretty smart businessman. He had an empire. An empire so much so that he could liquidate 1/3 of his assets and give them to his kid and not miss a beat. Could you do that? This guy was brilliant. In fact, he had an oldest son who was ready to run the whole thing. Could you do that? You want to talk about someone who's business savvy and logical and understands the behavior of people? This man has built an empire. And what does he do? When the loss is found, something that maybe some of us would consider absolutely reckless. Ring on his finger, jacket on his back, slippers on his feet, killed a fat cow. Let's have a celebration. Why? Because lost, found, celebrate. You know, Jesus has made a decision to meet people where they are, which is a pretty cliche phrase. Like, okay, yeah, Jesus meets you where you are. Let's think about it, though. Jesus decides to meet people where they are because he prioritizes meeting them over where they are. He's more interested in, as long as he gets to meet you, he honestly doesn't care where it is that he meets you. Why is that? It's simple. And if you're a longtime follower of Jesus, you already know what I'm about to say. Because Jesus gives every single one of us the exact same invitation, and it's 2 words. Follow me. So he doesn't care where he meets you, because he knows if he meets you, he can lead you out of the place you're in. So it doesn't matter where it starts. It doesn't matter. He said, my invitation, whether I meet you in the strip club or a strip mall, whether I meet you in a grocery store, at the ball field, wherever Jesus comes face to face with someone, he's saying, I don't care where we start. Because the truth is, I'm not leaving you where you start. Because in all of my relationships, I'm the one in the lead. And I'm going to give you the same invitation I give to anyone. Follow me, because we can't stay here. You know? And that's what he does. Lost, found, celebrate. Lost, found, celebrate. I think we can get better at this. And I think our church does a pretty good job at prioritizing people who are disconnected. And I think our church does a pretty good job at the preferences and the wants and desires of found people, of the 99, of church people, of suppressing those things because we realize they're not as important as people who are disconnected. I think our church does a really stinking good job out of it. But even still, a really good job isn't really what we set out for. We constantly want to be asking the question, how can we be more like Jesus? Not how can we be more of a really good job, you know? I think anytime we begin to do something like Jesus, it gives us the greatest opportunity to have influence with other people who follow Jesus. And so I don't want to speak holistically for every church in Coweta County. I just want to talk for us. And I think we could do a better job at the celebration side of things. I think we could up our game on the celebration side of things. And it probably means we'll be burned. It makes us a little vulnerable. And maybe we even end up with some egg on our face from time to time because we celebrate someone that at the end of the day had other plans. Because some people are just really good at manipulating, and it just is what it is. And maybe that egg ends up on our face. But I think the fear of being embarrassed should never overdo the directions that Jesus gives us. Because the truth is, when we follow Jesus, he's on the hook for all that intent. We're on the hook for obedience. And I think we ought to search, find, celebrate.